The Golden Notebook by Doris Lessing. To begin with, introduction written by Doris Lessing in 1993. This novel's progress continues to surprise me because it keeps putting its head up in new places and often not where one would expect. The most recent was China, where I was on a trip at the invitation of the main Chinese Writers Association. An edition of 80,000 had just been published. Not a large number in that vast country, a small edition for them. It sold out in 3 days. It had been published once before and had done well. Everyone has read it, they say, meaning, as this usually does these days, mostly people in universities. The universities I visited in Beijing, Shanghai, Xi'an and Canton have a most lively and informed interest in British and American literature. Only now has it occurred to me that universities are equivalent of the medieval monasteries, keeping things of the mind alive and well in countries where people are too poor to buy books. Not that China can any longer be described as a poor country. Recently, I got a letter from a waitress in an hotel in Rio saying, "I can't afford to buy books. My husband works in the university and he is allowed to use the library, and he got the Golden Notebook for me, and I feel I must tell you." I hear that the book is being assigned in history classes and politics classes in schools and universities. This pleases me, since one of the reasons I wrote the novel was that I felt there are blank spaces where novels ought to be, particularly in 19th century literature. For instance, I would like to read novels that give the taste and flavour of the Chartists and their personal lives, their discussions, their conflicts, and perhaps the small revolutionary groups that flourished in London in the 19th century, most of them dedicating to fomenting revolution in Europe. I think the Golden Notebook is a useful testament to its time, particularly now that communism is dead, or dying everywhere, or changing its nature. Nothing seems more improbable than what people believed when this belief has gone with the wind. Novels give you the matrix of emotions, give you the flavour of a time in a way formal history cannot. A Yugoslav woman student said to me, this states the reminiscence, how interesting to read all about those old politics, old and exotic in communist Yugoslavia. But you may hear too, it describes what happened in my political group in the 70s, or the Golden Notebook describes my life as a woman. When it first came out, it was considered quite an advanced book. But recently, it was given to girls of 15 in a school in North London, and they took it in their stride. This year, it is being read in a class in the University of Zimbabwe at the request of black and white students, male and female. They were surprised that the talk of the young communists was idealistic and optimistic in those ancient days before there was a communist regime in Zimbabwe. They associated communism with self-seeking and opportunism. It had not occurred to them that communism had begun as a genuine dream for a better world. I continue to get letters from men about the Golden Book, as many as from women. They may say that it opened their eyes to the feelings and experiences of women or that what interests them is the politics or the style of the main American character, who now seems to them quite ridiculously macho. Or a woman writes to say, and this has happened often, that her boyfriend or husband gave her the book, saying it influenced him. I also hear the other side of this, when a man says he has just read such and such a book, and I liked it. He was at the university where Doris Lessing was the property of the women's movement, and so he did not bother to read my books. And now he was sorry he didn't and was writing to tell me so. Yes, I do get a lot of feedback, and I'm always interested, particularly when it is unexpected. In Vermont, there is a bookstore called the Golden Notebook. I reread the novel the other day and remembered the fury of energy that went into it. Probably that is why the book goes on and on as it does, because of its charge. It does have a remarkable vitality. Some of it is the energy of conflict. I was writing my way out of one set of ideas, even out of a way of life, but that is not what I thought while I was doing it. Inside that tight framework is an effervescence. Sometimes the energy in a book contradicts its apparent message. The first time I thought about this was when I read Dostoevsky's The Devils and found myself invigorated and optimistic, when in fact a more pessimistic story can hardly be imagined. The other of my books, written with the same intensity, could, on the face of it, be more different than The Golden Notebook. It is The Making of the Representative for Planet 8. Both books mark limits. I meet women in their 50s who say, I was influenced by this book and I gave it to my daughter and she loves it. Or a young woman says, my mother gave me this book because she said it was important to her, and now I understand her much better. I used to hear, my mother read it and now I do. So that's 2 generations. But the other day I was told of a grandmother who gave it to her son, who gave it to his daughter. 3 generations. Yes, I am indeed flattered. Currently, I am writing volume 1 of my autobiography and thinking about some people and events that went into the Golden Notebook. I have to conclude that fiction is better at the truth than factual record. Why this should be so is a very large subject, and one I don't begin to understand. Now another introduction which Doris Lessing wrote in 1971. The shape of this novel is as follows. There is a skeleton or frame called Free Women, which is a convenient short novel about 60,000 words long and which could stand by itself. But it is divided into 5 sections and separated by stages of the 4 notebooks: black, red, yellow, and blue. The notebooks are kept by Anna Wolf, a central character of Free Women. She keeps 4 and not 1 because she recognizes she has to separate things off from each other out of fear of chaos, of formlessness, of breakdown. Pressures inner and outer end the notebooks. A heavy black line is drawn across the page of one after another. But now they are finished, from their fragments can come sometimes new, the Golden Notebook. Throughout the notebooks, people have discussed, theorized, dogmatized, labeled, compartmented, sometimes in voices so general and representative of the time that they are anonymous. You could put names to them like those in the old morality plays, Mr. Dogma and Mr. I am free because I belong nowhere, Miss, I must have love and happiness, and Mrs. I have to be good at everything I do, Mr. Where is a real woman? And Miss, where is a real man? Mr. I'm mad because they say I am, and miss life through experiencing everything. Mr. I make revolution and therefore I am, and Mr. and Mrs. if we deal very well with this small problem, then perhaps we can forget we daren't look at the big ones. But they have also reflected each other, being aspects of each other, given birth to each other's thoughts and behavior, are each other form wholes. In the inner golden notebook, things have come together. The divisions have broken down. There is formlessness with the end of fragmentation, the triumph of the second theme, which is that of unity. Anna and Saul Green, the American breakdown, they are crazy, lunatic, mad, what will you? They break down into each other, into other people, break through the false patterns they have made of their pasts, the patterns and formulas they have made to shore up themselves and each other, dissolve. They hear each other's thoughts, recognize each other in themselves. Saul Green, the man who has been envious and destructive of Anna, now supports her, advises her, gives her the theme for her next book, Free Women, an ironical title. The book which begins, the two women were alone in the London flat, and Anna, who has been jealous of Saul to the point of insanity, possessive and demanding, gives Saul the pretty new notebook, the golden notebook, which he has previously refused to do, gives him the theme for his next book, writing in it in the first sentence, on a dry hillside in Algeria, a soldier watched the moonlight glinting on his rifle. In the inner golden notebook, which is written by both of them, you can no longer distinguish what is Saul and what is Anna, and between them and the other people in the book. This theme of breakdown that sometimes happens when people crack up is a way of self-healing, of the inner self's diminishing of false dichotomies and divisions, has of course been written about other people as well by me. But this is where, apart from the odd short story, I first wrote about it. Here it is rougher, more close to experience before experience had shaped itself into thought and pattern. More valuable, perhaps, because it is raw material. But nobody so much as noticed this central theme, because the book was instantly belittled by friendly reviewers as well as by hostile ones, as being about the sex war, or was claimed by women as a useful weapon in the sex war. I have been in a false position ever since. Or the last thing I have wanted to do was to refuse to support women. To get the subject of women's liberation over with, I support it, of course, because women are second-class citizens, as they are saying energetically and competently in many countries. It can be said that they are succeeding, if only to the extent they are being seriously listened to. All kinds of people, previously hostile or indifferent, say, I support their aims, but I don't like their shrill voices and their nasty, ill-mannered ways. This is an inevitable and easily recognizable stage in every revolutionary movement. Reformers must expect to be disowned by those who are only too happy to enjoy what has been won for them. But I don't think that women's liberation will change much, not because there is anything wrong with their aims, but because it is already clear that the whole world is being shaken into a new pattern by the cataclysms we are living through, and probably by the time we are through, if we do get through at all, the aims of women's liberation will look very small and quaint. But this novel was not a trumpet for women's liberation. It described many female emotions of aggression, hostility, resentment. It put them into print. Apparently, what many women were thinking, feeling, experiencing, came as a great surprise. Instantly, a lot of very ancient weapons were unleashed. The main ones, as usual, being on the theme of she is unfeminine, she is a man-hater. This particular reflex seems indestructible. Men and many women said that the suffragettes were defeminized, masculine, brutalized. There is no record I have read of any society anywhere when women demanded more than nature offers them that does not also describe this reaction from men and some women. A lot of women were angry about the golden notebook. What woman will say to other women, grumbling in their kitchens and complaining and gossiping, of what they make clear in their masochism is often the last thing they will say aloud. A man may overhear. Women are the cowards they are because they have been semi-slaves for so long. The number of women prepared to stand up for what they really think, feel, experience with a man they are in love with is still small. Most women still run like little dogs with stones thrown at them when a man says, "You are unfeminine, aggressive. You are unmanning to me." It is my belief that any woman who marries or takes seriously in any way at all a man who uses this threat deserves everything she gets. For such a man is a bully, does not know anything about the world he lives in or about its history. Men and women have taken infinite numbers of roles in their past and do now in different societies. So he is ignorant or fearful about being out of step, a coward. I write all these remarks with exactly the same feeling as if I were writing a letter to post into the distant past. I am so sure that everything we now take for granted is going to be utterly swept away in the next decade. So, why write novels? Some books are not read in the right way because they have skipped a stage of opinion, assume a crystallization of information in society which has not yet taken place. This book was written as if the attitudes that have been created by the women's liberation movement already existed. It came out first 10 years ago in 1962. If it were coming out now for the first time, it might be read and not merely reacted to. Things have changed very fast. Certain hypocrisies have gone. For instance, 10 or even 5 years ago, it has been a sexually contumacious time. Novels and plays were being plentifully written by men, furiously critical of women, particularly from the States, but also in this country, portrayed as bullies and betrayers, but particularly as underminers and sappers. But these attitudes in male writers were taken for granted, accepted as sound philosophical basis, as quite normal, certainly not as woman-hating, aggressive, or neurotic. And it still goes on, of course. But things are better, there is no doubt of it. I was so immersed in writing this book that I didn't think about how it might be received. I was involved not merely because it was hard to write. Keeping the plan of it in my head, I wrote it from start to end, consecutively, and it was difficult. But because of what I was learning as I wrote, perhaps giving oneself a tight structure, making limitations for oneself squeezes out new substances where you least expect it. All sorts of ideas and experiences I didn't recognize as mine emerged when writing. The actual time of writing then, and not only the experiences that had gone into the writing, was really traumatic. It changed me. Emerging from this crystallizing process, handing the manuscript to publisher and friends, I learned I had written about a tract about sex war, the sex war, and fast discovered that nothing I said could change that diagnosis. Yet the essence of the book, the organization of it, everything in it, says implicitly and explicitly that we must not divide things off, must not compartmentalize. Bound, free, good, bad, yes, no, capitalism, socialism, sex, love, says Anna in Free Women, stating a theme, shouting it, announcing a motive with drums and fanfares, or so I imagined. Just as I believe that in a book called The Golden Notebook, the inner section called The Golden Notebook might be presumed to be a central point, to carry the weight of the thing, to make a statement. But no. Thank you.